Hello everybody and welcome to the shop. It's been quite a while since I made a video, and with the holidays I was extremely busy. I'm back in the shop and my goal is to make some cutting boards. I've never made a cutting board before, and I have the opportunity to make a couple. I've got plenty of wood in the shop and I've gone ahead and gathered it up. I've drawn out some plans, which I'll show you a little later in the video or in the cutting board video. But before I make those cutting boards, I realized I have never made a crosscut sled for this table saw that I have. And what I don't want to do, some of my strips will be about 1/4 inch. I don't want to pinch that wood between the blade and the fence and try to cut 1/4 inch strips and have them get thrown back at me or across the shop. So I'm going to build a down and dirty crosscut sled today. Let me show you what I've got laid out so far. I found a really nice piece of oak plywood that was given to me. It's about almost 25 inches across and almost 14 inches deep. I've got some table saw runners and they're already pre-drilled. There's a couple of screws in that one. So what I'm going to do, it's upside down on the saw right now and I've got it centered with the blade. I'm going to go ahead and line up the first runner and get it attached, and then that will allow me to line up the second runner. I'll get it attached. We'll get a backer board put across here and we'll go ahead and run it through the blade to get our zero clearance, and that should give me a down and dirty crosscut sled. I've got the first runner mounted and I just use screws. That way in the future, if I want to modify the sled and remove it, it won't be a problem. It fits right in the T-slots. Now what I want to do is get the second runner attached. I've drilled and countersunk 5 holes in this runner. I really only need 4 holes to hold the runner in place, but you'll notice at this end there are 2 holes that are fairly close together. My plan is to let the sled overhang the table saw. I'll slide this runner in, line it up with the edge of the sled. I'll be able from underneath to shoot those first 2 screws in, which will hold that runner in place. I can flip the sled over, drive the other 3 screws, and then I'll have a perfect dual runner sled base to work with. I've got the screws into the runner. It's going to hold it nice and square. We can go ahead and drive the other 3 now. With both sets of runners attached, I now want to flip the sled over and put some crystal clear paste wax on both runners as well as in both tracks and on top of the saw. That will allow the sled to move freely back and forth through the blade. I've applied a very liberal amount of crystal clear paste wax to the top of my saw as well as the tracks. While I'm letting that dry, I'm going to go ahead and apply the same wax to the bottom of my sled and the runners on my sled. Now my table, you can tell, it's seen better days. It's in need of a good thorough cleaning. That's not going to be able to happen right away, but in the near future, we're going to go through the shop and all of the raw steel tops on this particular saw and my other saws, we're going to get those cleaned up. But for now, we're just going to put a coat of wax that'll keep them from rusting any farther and will allow the sled to move freely back and forth within the tracks. Now that we've waxed the top of the saw and the bottom of the sled, you can see just how effortlessly it slides in the tracks. Let's turn our attention to a backer board for the sled that we'll be able to register our stock against. This board must be perfectly square and must be perpendicular to the blade. I've cut a piece of 2x4 the exact width of my sled. What I want to do now is join it and plane it so that I get it perfectly square on all 4 sides, and then we can use that as a backer board for our sled. With two sides of the board jointed, I can now take it to the planer and plane the other two sides into perfect square. Now that my 2x4 is squared up on all four sides, I want to turn my attention to getting it mounted to the sled perpendicular to my saw blade. Another thing I want to pay attention to is I don't want to mount the 2x4 all the way to the back of the sled, because if I do, when I cut through and make my zero clearance cut, it's going to go into the 2x4 to be able to finish the cut on the wood. And if I do that, I'm going to cut pretty well my sled in half. I don't want to cut my sled in half. So what I'm going to do is move the board forward, and I'm going to give myself about 11 to 11.5 inches from the front of the sled to the stop board. That leaves me with about 2 inches behind the sled, or at the back of the sled. So I've got a little bit of rigidity when I take my cut all the way to the stop. I fully extended the blade of my table saw. Then I took this rafter square and I ran it along the blade, which is going to give me a nice perpendicular line along the back of the sled. I moved it forward so that I have about 2 inches behind my stop. And now what I'm going to do is score a line along the back of the stop. This line, I will drill several holes just on the opposite side of it, making sure I am far enough away from the blade not to impede the blade. Then I'll flip it upside down, clamp it together, clamping this to the line, and I'll run the screws through the backer board. I drilled and countersunk the holes along the bottom of this board, and I've come back and realigned the board to be perpendicular with the blade using my rafter square once again. What I need to do now is put a couple of pilot holes in this board. I've got it clamped tightly to the sled. I'll put a couple of pilot holes, and then I'll go ahead and drive some screws up through the bottom of the sled, and that should lock this backer board down. I'm going to start off with 2 holes because the other holes are toward the outside of the sled and the clamps are in the way. So we'll lock the 2 center ones down. We'll retest for square, and when we're happy that it's square, we'll go ahead and drive the 2 screws in the outside corners. Oops, it was a little off square. I had a drill bit jammed between the fence and the rafter square. We're perfect on that side. Perfect on that side. Let's go ahead and drive the 2 outside screws. The last thing we need to do to finish our sled off is to go ahead and run our zero clearance cut up the center of the sled, stopping at the backer board. To test our sled for square, we'll take this piece of scrap and we're going to go ahead and make a cut, and then we'll flip the piece over and see if we can slide it right back onto the blade without any resistance. If there is no resistance, then we know our cut is perpendicular to the fence of our sled. We've made our cut. Let's flip it over and just see if it'll slide on. Perfect. Absolutely no resistance. That tells me that the fence for my sled is perpendicular to the blade. I'd like to thank you for joining me tonight for this build. Now, this is literally as simple as you can get when it comes to building a crosscut sled. You can do all types of things to these sleds to fancy them up. You can put hold downs on them. You can put special stop blocks that flip. I've seen all types of variations. All I need to do is cut perfectly straight strips of wood, and this sled is going to deliver every time. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me in the shop. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon.